Okay, so my family and I, we recently did a factory relocation deal through Monte RV. So I just wanted to create a video to kind of let people know what that experience was like. If maybe you're thinking about doing something similar, maybe I can answer some of the questions you have going in. I've never rented an RV before, never driven an RV. So there was a little bit of apprehension at first, but once I looked into it, I thought it was something I could do. I thought it would be something that would be pretty fun for the family. So we ended up doing it. So here's kind of my experience with El Monte RV and doing the factory relocation. Okay, so costs. How much is it going to cost you? Yeah, you can get the RV for $1 a day. That is $1 a day for the first 7 days. Then after that, it is 45 bucks a day or $49 a day. And you can rent it for up to 21 days. We decided to do a 10-day trip. So for the first 7 days, it was $1. And then 49 bucks a day after that, I believe. Again, it could be 45, I forget. So one of the biggest costs that we incurred in doing this was the transfer fee. You could pick it up at the factory at no cost, but if you want it transported to Chicago, which is where we wanted to go, it was 375 bucks to get it sent there. So our trip was basically from Chicago to Los Angeles. So we had to pay that fee in order to get it there, but I think it was well worth it because we wanted to explore Chicago and wanted to make that part of our vacation. Another fee you're going to have is insurance. You might have rental coverage on your insurance, but chances are it's not going to cover a $100,000 vehicle, which mine didn't. So I had to pay the $12 a day through Illinois. I think they make you buy that. And then there was another $16 a day fee through El Monte RV if you wanted some extra coverage. So I elected to do that, and it ended up being 28 bucks a day. So insurance is going to be another cost you're going to incur if you decide to do this. Add-ons, they do have add-ons if you want to add like a kitchen kit or a bedroom kit. I think that has linens. Kitchen kit has pots and pans, what have you. They'll charge you for that too. We elected not to do that because we were driving back to LA. We figured we would just buy some of that stuff in Chicago and then we'd actually have it when we got back as opposed to renting it. So that's what we did. You can choose to rent their stuff, but we didn't do that. It came with 2,500 miles. So that was a big savings. But if you want to deviate from the route at all, at least from Chicago to Los Angeles, you were going to add some miles and you were going to have to pay for some miles. So I prepaid I added another 100 miles to our trip at 29 cents a mile. You could prepay, but the problem is you could add 500 miles, but if you only use 200, you're not going to get the 300 back. So you kind of got to guess a little bit on what it was. And if you went over the 2,500 and didn't prepay for any extra miles, it was going to be 45 cents a mile after that. So just keep that in mind when you're doing it. The other big cost, as many people could imagine, is gas. So I spent 982 bucks on gas, I believe, which was probably the biggest expense of the trip. I mean, these things get 8 miles a gallon, so you can imagine going 2,500 miles or more, you're gonna spend a decent amount of gas. So those were kind of the big costs of the trip. Okay, so what type of RV are you going to get? They'll tell you straight up from the beginning that they don't know and they can't tell you. You can make a request, but this thing is called like a run of fleet. So basically it's anything in their inventory that you could get that they need transported somewhere. So anything from a small Class C to a large Class A. We were hoping to not get a Class A. I put in a request to say, hey, give me anything that's a Class C, but I didn't know much about Class A. They just seemed too big, and I'd never driven an RV. I didn't want anything gigantic. So luckily we got a Class C. It was actually a pretty big one, 31 feet, but at the end of the day, it was just kind of like a Ford truck. So it was pretty easy to drive. Just keep in mind that if you do it, you might not know it literally until the day of what you're going to get. So, and that was definitely the case with us. So it worked out fine, but you just never know. Okay, driving. How was driving it? Super simple. I thought it was a lot easier than I had anticipated. Like I said before, it's just like driving a truck. Obviously, you're hauling a lot behind you, but you just kind of got to plan a little bit ahead and make sure that you're doing everything you need to do to have that much length in a vehicle. When I was going to get gas, I would just plan a couple moves ahead, make sure that if I was pulling in somewhere that I was going to be able to get out. I was not pulling in somewhere and then after the fact thinking, okay, how am I going to get out of here? I was literally planning 3 steps ahead. And that's really what you got to do with something like this. So You know, the other things are kind of simple, like, you know, if you're going to a double turn lane, make sure you're on the right, you know, so you can make that wide turn, as opposed to being, you know, kind of stuck between two vehicles, one parked in the middle of the street and then one on your right. So just little things like that, you'll get the hang of it. Wasn't hard at all. So I can't speak to what it would be like if you did get a Class A. But there's videos online you could read or you could watch. I was definitely watching some of them just in anticipation of getting one of those. Fortunately, I didn't have to worry about it. So, but I would say, even if you've never driven an RV before, I found it to be pretty simple. Okay, hookups. What are hookups? Like, that's when you're going to want to connect to city water. You're going to want to connect to electricity. You're going to want to dump your sewer. So I didn't know any of that going in, and it was actually pretty intuitive. If you could plug in a radio to the wall or hook up a hose to something, you could do this. It was pretty easy. Even dumping the sewer was easy. So there's videos online you could watch, but please don't let that dissuade you from renting an RV, because I know it seems foreign, but it's really easy at the end of the day, and I really had no issues doing that throughout the trip. So keep that in mind, that you'll be able to do it, and don't let that worry you at all. Okay, planning your trip. So what I did is I tried to make reservations at places, RV parks or whatever, knowing that I could cancel and get my money back within 48 hours. I figured that within 48 hours of any location, I was going to know where we were going to be. So I did end up making some reservations that I canceled, but I ended up getting my money back. All but one. We were going to Memphis, and then we ended up not going to Memphis. I didn't cancel it in time, so I was out $30, but it wasn't a big deal. But you know, you kind of want to strike that balance between planning and then also being spontaneous and deciding, hey, we're going to stay 2 days here, or maybe let's try to do this route. So you can do it. You don't want to over plan it, but you also don't want to be stuck somewhere where you have nowhere to stay. So I watched a video that said some people, you know, there were so many people traveling that it was hard to find places at RV parks. I didn't find that to be the case. In Amarillo, we did call two and they were booked up, but we called a third and they had plenty of space. So just keep that in mind. You do want to plan, but you also want to leave that level of flexibility should you want to do something else. Okay, winterization, what is that? You're picking up the RV from a cold weather climate. So they say that the RVs are winterized, I mean, it has no water in it. Because I guess when water gets in the pipes, if it freezes, it can expand and ruin the piping in the RV. So just keep that in mind. They suggest that you don't fill it with water till you reach a warmer climate, something that doesn't obviously dip below 32 degrees at any point. So you can still use the bathroom. They'll give you some antifreeze, and I actually bought some extra antifreeze. So anytime you go to the bathroom, you just pour a cup of that in there with it, and you should be good. That should save the pipes. But in terms of like using the faucet and showering and all that, you're going to want to make sure you're in an area that's warm enough that can sustain water in the pipes. It was the one weird thing is everywhere we were that was colder, I did see everyone hooked up to water. I was like the only one, so that wasn't. So maybe the joke's on me. I don't know. I'm not an experienced RV person. I just knew that I didn't want to damage this vehicle at all because I did not have the money to pay for whatever damage I was going to incur. So just keep in mind, though, that when you do pick it up, it will be winterized, and that you got to head somewhere warm before you can really use the full functionality, at least in terms of water. Okay, wrapping it up, it was probably the best trip we've ever taken. So much fun. We saw so many things. We had so many miles to cover, and were able to go through. I think we went through 9 states in 10 days, and we left left us enough room to like stop. We saw family. We took in, you know, we went to the Grand Canyon. We did like all the little things along the trip that you would want to stop and do. We tried to do, and it was just amazing. Just great time with the family, bonding. I was kind of sad that it came to an end, but I think I would 100% do it again. Maybe take a different route this time just to change it up. But everyone at El Monte RV was awesome. Everyone at Arts RV in Glen Ellen, Illinois, right outside Chicago, they were great. Just no real negatives of taking the trip at all. The only thing was that I was kind of apprehensive at first because I'd never driven an RV before. But once you do it, you'll just realize it's easy, and it's nothing to be scared about at all. So I just encourage anyone who's thinking of doing something like this to do it, because you will save money if you do the factory relocation. I think we saved about $2,000 doing it the way we did, and I didn't have to pay for miles, at least the bulk of the miles, and then didn't have to pay the daily rate that can sometimes be expensive. So if you're thinking about doing a factory relocation, definitely do it. I thought it was awesome. If you have any questions at all, shoot me a comment and I'll respond. I'll let you know if I can answer the question at all. I definitely will. So hopefully this encourages people to go out and rent an RV.